to drop us a Q&A to say that you can see our screen, which has got our lovely photo. You can't miss us.
And you can see us in the corner.
You can. There we go. So if we can just get one to say.
Oh, look, there we go. Someone.
Can see.
Christy, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Look, see who says we don't know technology.
Yes. So we feel a long way away from this time 12 months ago.
I don't even remember 12 months ago, Phoebe.
Yeah.
I sort of think that my hair was longer.
Probably more hair dye required.
There is definitely more hair dye required this day and age.
And like we're facing a whole host of new issues. Anyone that's and particularly if you're in hospitality, but other industries, all sorts of staffing challenges at the moment.
I think that we have actually gone 150% full circle. We've passed the 100.
Yeah.
In that 12 months ago. I'm sorry, I'm just putting my water bottle on the floor because it's rattling. 12 months ago, we were like, we've got way too many staff. What do we do?
With COVID, oh my God, redundancy, what do I do?
And now we are like, oh my God, I can't find staff. And I'm sure there are probably some of our participants that are nodding with us right now saying, yep, the skill shortage that we're experiencing here in Far North Queensland, particularly tourism and hospitality, is quite dire. And there's a very high level of frustration.
And just a bit of a prediction, if it continues this way, everyone's coffee and going out for lunch and dinner is going to become vastly more expensive because the wages that people are demanding, because they can, is going up.
It's gone back to that trade skill shortage. You know, when you couldn't get an electrician for, you right there, you couldn't get a trade, or an electrician or a plumber for.
Now you can't get a barista.
Or a chef,
yeah,
or even people to show up.
And I was talking to CBC the other day, one of the recruitment agencies, and they're saying they're finding it difficult to even get professionals. I think the marketplace is really stagnant at the moment. People are probably feeling more comfortable than they were 12 months ago, but they're not prepared to up and move and change jobs. If they've got some stability where they're working, they're wanting to remain there. So there's kind of that lack of movement that's happening in the job market. So if you've got a new position coming up, there's not a lot of people floating around at the moment.
Yeah.
So
anyway, we haven't got that I guess that transient nature of tourists coming around the country to fill potentially some of these hospitality and tourism type positions.
Also fruit pickers, another huge issue. So tell you what, it's a great opportunity at the moment for any of those high school kids that are wanting to pick up weekend work or some evening work as well. I know my daughter and all her friends are just raking it in at the moment because they're doing dishes and waitressing and making beds and stuff because that's who they can get, particularly on the weekends at a reasonable rate. So
absolutely. Which it does tie into our topic of casual employment today because we've got up here in Far North Queensland potentially probably one of the highest demographics of casual employees, right, wrong or otherwise, however it came to be. That's just the reality of the situation. And now the changes to the casual employment legislation, I guess when you look at it from the outside, it's, oh my God, what does this mean? Like, what am I required to do? What is a casual? So that's sort of the tack that we're going to take with today's webinar, is to look more of the practical application. So we've compiled a number of the questions that we're being asked here, and that's how we're sort of going to run this webinar. And we're then going to take those questions and put them up as like a Q&A type sheet. So don't stress if you miss any of the questions on the webinar today. That's okay. We will have the Q&A running on the webinar as well, and then we'll translate those questions onto the Q&A sheet that we're going to do, that we'll be able to send out with the recording of the webinar.
So I guess just a little bit of history, why is this casual such a big issue that's come up? We've always had a lot of casual employment in Australia. And I guess that stems back to the ideology that is really pushed from the union movement and from the left side of politics, is that the want for people to have stability in employment and continuity of employment. That's not only so that people feel secure in their jobs, but it also is so that people are able to take their annual leave, and when they take time off, they can get personal, when they get sick, they can take personal leave, etc. So there is this big push to say that we have been slowly, over time, we've been normalising casual employment. So we have been not using casual as they're meant to be fill in ad hoc top-up staffing requirements, and employers have been putting casuals into roles on a permanent basis. And the hard thing is that once you start to have your staff as casual, it's quite hard sometimes to wind them back into being permanent, and that is largely because they would have to take a 25% drop in their wages if they're going to go back to a permanent. So you can say, well, if I've been working with you for 6 or 12 months, I've been getting a higher rate of pay, I've got a good relationship, I've still got some job security. Now you're telling me I have to lose 25% of my pay. Yeah, I'll get annual leave, but it's still not going to be as much as what I would get in the hour, in the hand by the hour for working casual. And we live to our means, so we get used to earning, $800 a week. Then we work, where our standard of living costs $800 a week is often the case. So it's really hard for people to make that transition. So I think that's a real issue. I also think too, one more thing, that there is a real fallacy still around that, people get very nervous around employment and employee rights and fair work and having problems with staff and what can we do and can we get rid of them, and people think, well, if I've got them as casual, it's going to be easy for me just to be able to terminate their employment.
That's so far from the truth.
That's so far from the truth.
So far from the truth. What I do want to add in though is that the legislation, particularly obviously this most recent raft of changes that came through in March of this year, so we're still looking at something that's relatively new. The whole casual part-time thing has been around since David was a boy, but there's now, as Phoebe said, this bigger emphasis from the legislation about shifting the focus from casual to part-time or permanent, as it's referred to.
Mm-hmm.
It does not take into consideration the legislation redraft and what's been changed. It does not take into consideration the employees that want to stay casual.
Mm-hmm.
So employers are between a rock and a hard place, because genuinely for some people, they want to stay casual. Whether it's because of the higher rate of pay, whether it's because they don't like the feeling of being tied to it could be any number of reasons.
They like the flexibility, so they like to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to be available next week, so I want to be able to take the time off, and casuals have more ability to do that than when you're permanent.
Yeah, but the legislation doesn't deal with that.
No.
So,
but I think it is something they're aware.
I think there's a gaping great big hole in employers being able to demonstrate compliance where they're working with employees that are not interested in conversion.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that today as well. We've got some more D's dazzles. Beck quite
D's
dazzles.
Dazzles.
This was Beck's terminology.
Like
so I think everybody likes it except for me, because I feel like I need to put in my spirit fingers and jazz hands and all of that. So these are just some really sharp, short points. Reviewing casuals is not a one-time obligation. So Phoebe likes to use the term set and forget. It is definitely not that. So even though you might be doing a review now, it's not something that you just put in the drawer, go, right, yeah, I've done that.
I asked them 3 years ago, they didn't want to transition across, so I've done my obligation. It's not like that.
Yeah. Casuals can be harder to engage than part-time employees. And I guess if you've never tried both, it is hard to make a determination as to what's in the best interest of your business. We know that employers are struggling with reliability, consistency, and having people regularly showing up for their shifts, not in all cases, but sometimes that casual connotation can be causing more harm than good or causing more frustrations. Casuals can access unfair dismissal. So if you're a large employer, more than 15 employees, once that magic 6 months mark hits, that they're treated exactly the same as a part-time or a full-time employee. If you're a small business, once that 12-month mark hits, again, they're treated exactly the same.
Yeah, so there is a little bit more wiggle room in some cases, but things like redundancy payments and things.
Yeah, redundancy payment, any of those sort of leave entitlements. But when you're talking unfair dismissal, general protections, all of those sorts of things, it's exactly the same.
Yeah. It's not easier to turn. A regular and consistent casual is not easier to terminate than a part-time staff member. There's still a process you're going to have to follow.
That's right. And long service leave, I mean, casuals have been getting long service leave since 1994, but we still come across employers saying casuals, they don't get long service leave. No, it's true.
And set them up for long service leave right from day dot.
Because trying to find those hours records 7 years after the fact is quite a challenge. So yeah, that's my dazzles for the day. Spirit fingers, here we go.
Breaking news.
Well,
We now have a definition.
Yeah, it was breaking news in March, but it's still getting out there.
Still
Traction's still getting out there. So there's been an amendment. Oh, we've got our slide thing set up. Again, technology is not our strong point. We now have a definition of casual employment, and it's quite clear. And a casual employee is basically an employee where the employer makes no firm advance commitment to continuing or indefinite work according to an agreed roster pattern for that person, and the employee accepts the position knowing that there is no firm advance commitment. And it's all well and good to have your contracts of employment. We're making recommendations now that your contracts of employment need to start referring to this terminology. So there's no firm advance commitment is going to become second language, and your casual employment contracts, if you haven't taken the steps to review them, you probably need to.
There's some really important things like, not putting in probationary period, not putting hours or defined hours or specified hours, and
loaded rates,
not paying like some people do. They say they're casual, but I still pay them annual leave
because I want to be nice.
That is an issue. Anything that implies that it's a permanent relationship is potentially going to bite you in the bum.
Yeah, and particularly flat rates for casuals. We've spoken about this before, because when you structure a flat rate for a casual employee, forgetting the fact that you might have an enterprise agreement that allows for flat rates, that's sort of in a separate realm. But if you're under the awards, if you build a flat rate, you're giving the expectation or the connotation that the person is going to be there to work that set of circumstances. To work an average of hours, which calls a flat rate. So there is a risk factors.
And this is, what happens is that if there is ever a casual staff member contests the fact that they should have been permanent, there'll be a number of tests or deciding factors to determine whether or not this relationship was permanent or casual. So each of these things, the contract, whether there's a probation, whether they have flat hourly rates, that's all some of the indicators that they will use to look at defining, is this a casual or isn't this a casual? It's just not nothing's black and white.
No.
It's a number of contributing factors that would then shift the pendulum one way or another.
Absolutely. So you now have the obligation to provide all new casual employees with the casual employee information statement. If you haven't seen that, jump on the Fair Work website, 2-page document that you download. It is now a mandatory requirement. You have to give the Fair Work information statement and the casual employee.
I think they've been tied together. Didn't something just come out? They're tying it together.
Not when I downloaded it yesterday.
Right, okay.
So that is very much a possibility that they'll morph into two, but at this point in time, I would want to stake the lives of my children.
No, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe you can show that they've signed it or they've seen it, so you can have it like we do as part of the handbook or something like that. You don't have to give them the separate sheet.
As long as you can demonstrate
they've signed it, they've got it.
Yeah. So all new employees have to have that on commencement. There's now an obligation for you to provide existing casual employees with the information statement by the 27th of September. There is a small business exemption, but we're going to talk about that sort of thing in a little while. Oddly enough, I guess the 27th of September, people have said, what's the significance of that? It's exactly 6 months after the date the legislation was changed. So that ties in with that 6-month regular systematic assessment type mechanisms. So that's why that date is there. Download it from the Fair Work website and check all your documents to make sure all of your old copies are replaced.
Yes, and for those people that have got handbooks with us, we probably need to look at updating your handbooks to ensure that they include the new Fair Work statement. We can get that merged in, or both. And this is a reminder once again, you should be getting those staff handbooks signed off on an annual basis. So that should be emailing it out, making them available, and being very transparent and clear. This is our policies, we're meeting all of our commitments, and it's not a set and forget. I did that 5 years ago and things have changed. It's every year that it gets reviewed, looked at, sent out to staff. Staff will acknowledge that they've seen it. Super important. Try and align it with something that is easy to remember. So for example, you might say the 1st of July, so because that's the new financial year, or when there's pay increase, or it might be at Christmas time. Because if you don't have sort of a time, a specific time that's a trigger, it is really easy, as we all know, to lose track of time, and then we kind of get out of kilter, and suddenly it's been years and we haven't reviewed our contracts, our rates, or our handbook, and there could be something that you're missing. It's those small tweaks that you just need to keep on top of when you're looking after your staff.
Absolutely. So casual conversion is not a new thing. It has been in the modern awards and has been there for quite some time. And it contains provisions that deal with the right to convert 12 months or 6 months. You need to check your award, because some awards are 6, some are 12, some have got some minor, differences in definition. So it's really...
Is there some with 3?
Not that I'm aware of. There could be though. We're going to do award bingo.
Yeah.
So that when we've actually dealt with all 122 awards,
we can say we've done.
We've done quite a few, but there are still a couple that we actually haven't had much to do with. So really, really important that you understand the casual conversion clause in your award. You will find it in usually the types of employment. So when you jump into Fair Work and you've got that little index down the side, types of employment, casual employment, it's generally going to be in there, and it's a clause that is about this long.
Yeah.
So really important that
and if you jump in and you don't understand it, get in contact with us so that we can help. Deanne is always more than happy to take your phone calls any day, day or night, to be able to explain it.
You make fun of me reading legislation.
Actually, while we're talking about that too, there are some odd things that are in some of the awards. So, for example, under the construction industry, casuals get entitlements as soon as they leave. For a long service leave sort of component, don't they?
There's all of these other sorts of morphings of casual coming in.
Bits and pieces that are coming in, so you need to be across it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of those things that I would be factoring into your annual audit. So annual audits include things like checking people's pay rates in their system, checking the classification grades, particularly if you're working in industry where there's pay points, and then also refreshing, making sure that you're aware of the casual conversion clause to see if there has been any amendments to it. And then that ties into your employee handbook, making sure that your employees are regularly reinducted into your policies, because my world deals with probably the not so nice areas. I do a lot of investigations and grievances and conflict. And it goes a long way when you can demonstrate as an employer that you've regularly trained and made your employees aware of what the expectations are, particularly in the areas of bullying, harassment, discrimination, sexual harassment, all of those things.
With talking about the casuals and some of those funny idiosyncrasies and things that you can miss if you don't do that audit too, we've had a number of cases this year, and I was talking to an IR lawyer who was saying his caseload is just filled with this wage theft. And this is when employees are saying they've been underpaid. And I would say that in 95% of these cases, the employer has genuinely not realised that they're underpaid. They just haven't had the classification correctly. They haven't understood the allowances, some of the penalties, some of the start and finish times with the entitlements. If they had known about it, they would have either paid it or they would have been able to do some roster adjustments so that they didn't fall into that. But they've been caught with their pants down, and in some cases having to do back pays for 7 years just because they didn't understand it. So super, super, super important. We can't stress it strongly enough how important it is to do those regular reviews. They seem to be just updating those modern awards all the time.
Yeah, well, they're in a 4-year review cycle. So every 4 years, you've got your supplementary reviews that come through, but there's a major review of every award every 4 years.
And they have rotate what awards they go through?
Yeah, so they don't do them all at once. They're on a...
Yeah, so they're doing the manufacturing one at the moment, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's even some hearings that are coming out about past reviews. So it's a complicated thing. Like, we're first to admit we're not good with technology. We're not, but we're pretty good with this sort of stuff. This is what we do. So
we know what to look for and what to ask.
Yeah, so it is a difficult area to navigate. If you're in business and you're so consumed with what your business needs to do to be profitable, sustainable, all of those things, this is one of those areas that has got the capacity to derail all of your hard work. So if you're in need of some assistance, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. So I'll just die quietly here. No, I need help, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about casual conversion. So casuals need to be offered, depending upon the award, after 12 or 6 months, the right to transition from from casual to permanent employment. I think all the awards just about have to say that has to be in writing, doesn't it now?
Yeah, pretty much. But also the information in the casual employment information statement specifically deals with offers being in writing.
Yeah.
And look, and it's one of the questions that we talk about documentation is going to be the key, because it's very easy to have a conversation with somebody. Oh, Phoebe, you've been here for a little while. You've been working 5 days a week. We really want to talk about converting you over to permanent employment.
No,
Phoebe goes, nah, get stuff. Don't want to do that. Okay, that's fine. All good. And then that conversation, you've had it. But if Phoebe then decides to challenge you for it, recalling it about what was said and how it was said, very difficult to do. So documentation is going to be critical.
When can the right to convert be refused?
We're going to talk about that.
Oh, that's what we're talking about.
I've got a whole other slide.
All right. Okay. And what about casuals and redundancy notice?
They still don't get redundancy pay. They're not
still the process.
They're not excluded from the process. The consultation, the feedback, all of those, redeployment, all of those sorts of things, they're not exempt from. It is just basically the dollar component that is attached to the decision.
Mm-hmm. And this is just in general about redundancy. The actual process for redundancy isn't that complicated, but it's very specific as to the steps that you need to follow. It's well documented on Fair Work. If you go into it, you want to go and research it yourself, or if you give us a call. I had someone call the other day and I was able to answer her questions about redundancy in 5 minutes. She'd spent the whole day researching and getting herself really confused. But we can't, even if it's a completely genuine redundancy, you still have to follow the steps.
Yeah.
You can't not go through the right process, be that casual or permanent.
That's right.
Or if you're a small business.
Okay, so we now are going to enter into our very exciting slides. And again, technology, not our strong point, so we apologise in advance. Hey, I did write these. So that means that if there are typos in it, definitely it's not my strong point, so I apologise in advance. But we now have got about 17, 18 of the same looking slides.
But we'll go through them quickly.
We'll go through them quickly. This is all sort of like the practical application. So this is a combination of all of the questions that we've generally been asked since this whole casual thing blew up, for want of a better word. Because it's easy to read the casual information statement. Yeah, anyone can do that. But what does it actually mean and how do we translate it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to do with these next section of slides. So we've spoken about what is casual employment,
mm-hmm.
And those second and third dot points are your critical ones.
I think too, it is important to know that just because someone's been casual for a long period of time doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be eligible for permanent employment. So for example, if you have got someone who works a very ad hoc roster, so my husband, for example, he's casual and he never knows week to week, day to day really what he's working, because it really depends upon what work gets called in to go to. So he's been working with the company for a couple of years, but he really is a true casual. Like some weeks, he might do no roster, he might work 50 hours, he might work 8 hours. Yeah, exactly. It is all over the shop. It really does depend upon the work. So even if he went to them and said, I want to have a regular, I would like to be converted. Look, if we were able to show a pattern that he always worked at least, 16 hours a week, he might be able to say, well, I'd like to go permanent and have the agreement for 16 hours per week. But it would be his employer would have a good case to say, well, we can't guarantee you that, or it's up and down all the time with it.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that the changes in the definition of casual employment are included in the Fair Work Act. So the Act is the pinnacle piece of legislation. So we can't override what's in the Act. You've then got your award, which sits under the Act.
Mm-hmm.
So the award casual conversion clause then provides the specifics. So we've got the definition, then we've got the industry application. And using Steve's example, it may very well be that, you could demonstrate a pattern of 16 hours, but as the employer, they may not then meet the definition of part-time.
Yeah.
So they may not be able to give set days of the week. So all of those things then factor into whether or not they can offer conversion.
Excellent. Okay.
So
What is firm advance commitment?
flash bit of
Terminology.
It is essentially the new version of ongoing commitment to work. So whether the employee can meet the requirements of the award, whether or not there's going to be any degree of regularity, if you know that you're going to be able to employ this casual on a contract for the next 6 months, there probably could be a firm ongoing commencement. And I think this terminology really did come from those work pack cases.
Yeah.
Where the roster was established.
It was like 12 months in advance, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it's it is essentially whether or not you can say that what you think the person is going to be working week after week, month after month on an ongoing basis. It's very exciting, isn't it? It's all very exciting.
I'm a small business with less than 15 employees. Do I have to offer casual conversion?
Well, this is debatable. And I think even within the office here, we've got differing perspectives. And again, we don't have the test case. You'll see my last little point there is our recommendation is not to be the test case. So according to the Casual Employee Information Statement, small business employers do not have to offer written casual conversion, right? So that's the written casual conversion from the employer. But the employee can request casual conversion in accordance with the award. So there's a difference between offer and request. So the Casual Employee Information Statement, it says if you have less than 15 employees, you do not have to offer it. However, your award, which sits underneath the Act, then may have a different set of requirements. So if your casual conversion clause in the award says that you do have to offer, our interpretation sort of is hinging on the fact it goes back to the award. It may very well be that the Casual Employee Information Statement says you have to do a written offer, or you don't have to do a written offer if you've got less than 15, but the award may then say the employee can request.
So let's just make this really easy, guys. And our advice is always offer and offer it in writing.
Yes.
And then there's going to be no argument with it.
Yeah, but even like it may very well be that you're doing a bit of a review of your assessment of your award, your workforce and your employees. You may not be ready by the 27th of September, so
you've got a little bit of
time frames don't become as clear cut. But I think the fact that they've referenced an exemption in the information statement doesn't really give us any ability to sleep easier at night.
However, just on a ad hoc kind of basis, how often, when employers have offered regular, consistent casuals to go permanent, have they accepted it?
I think
in your experience?
In my experience, it largely depends on the industry. So if we're looking at things like social and community services, they're saying, yeah, no, I want to be part-time. I want some degree of regularity. If we're in tourism and hospitality, which may be industries.
At the start of the season, no. At the end of the season, yes.
And this is where it changes. People's life situation change. I was dealing with an employer in the health support service, health professionals. They had an employee who they'd offered to go from casual to part-time, and the employee rejected it. The employee then suffered a personal injury outside of work, broke their foot in a million places, and was off work for 4 months. So it was then at that point in time the employee wanted to retract and go, no, now I want to be permanent. So it can change in the blink of an eye. And if you can't document that you had that conversation, you are really going to be pushing poo uphill.
That's a very technical term.
It is. That's my technical term for the day.
I think we've spoken about the 27th.
Yep.
Haven't they? So yes, you do.
There are requirements. Again, small business, large business, a little bit of a variance there. You have to make sure that you are adhering to first the information statement, then the award.
And I think this award too is, just to rephrase what Deanne said, some awards for the part-time are very specific, that you've got to provide days and hours of working, whereas some of and so for you to be able to make your casual permanent, they would have to be able to meet that criteria, whereas some awards for part-time is a lot more general, and it's got to be reasonably predictable hours of work. It's a lot more general with it. So obviously if you're filling ones that are more general and you've got someone, potentially there is more of an they've got more of an argument to be transitioning across. Whereas if it's one with the very set hours and they are all over the shop, you could say, well, I just can't give you that set in stone number of hours with it.
Yeah, I think this is just my personal projection, Dee's dazzles.
These days, yep.
Is that we may see a higher emphasis on things like individual flexibility agreements coming back in, because I think that there's this little gap where employers are happy to offer part-time and employees generally wanting to have part-time, but they can't get that regularity. They can't say you're going to be working every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 9 to 5. So I think that there may be a bit of an increase in IFAs to just vary that section of the award with mutual agreement. Can't be a condition of employment. But
it was being bantered about at one stage to bring in another classification, which is between a casual part-time.
I wanted, but they didn't listen to me.
Yeah, it sort of hasn't been in the latest rounds of talks, but they were talking about sort of a
flexi part-time.
Flexi part-time, so it's not so set, but it is more permanent. But
yeah,
and flexibility agreements could be a way around that.
That's right, they could be.
What happens if my employer doesn't reply to my employee doesn't reply to the office? Can I assume no or yes?
Or can I withdraw it?
Or can I withdraw it?
Yeah, so this again goes back to the casual information employee statement. There's a requirement in there to say that the written offer and you have to reply to it within 21 days. So what happens if the employee does not? Again, what we're saying is your best option is to have the offer in writing with a section, and we've got really good at doing these for employers to try and take the headache out of this casual conversion by having a very structured and consistent approach. So it sort of demonstrates that you're not applying favoritism to any casual employees because everybody's getting the same documentation. But what we have sort of worked out with dealing with employees is that we need the offer, the acceptance and or rejection on the same piece of paper. And the reason why we want that is because then it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
It's pretty much its basics. It helps the employee with the information, but also helps the employer with very clear documentation.
Yeah.
In these offers of casual conversion, we're referring to the fact that they've met the requirements. We want to talk to them about offering, do they want to convert or do they not want to convert, and a requirement to return it within a certain period of time.
So what have I done? I've done a bit of workforce planning, and I realised that if I actually transition my casuals across to permanent, it's going to cost me less money as a business.
Yep.
So I actually want everybody to go from casual to permanent, but I give them these offers and they say, nah, we'd rather stay with the rate.
Yep. Then you're going through a significant change to your workforce, and you're going through that redundancy process because you're essentially making the casual employees redundant. Their positions that they hold are no longer going to exist in your establishment. You then have to offer them redeployment into that part-time role. So the casual conversion is, I guess, potentially an easier and quicker way to start to deal with that, because you'll get the voluntary ones coming across. Then if you have to force the decision, you're looking at significant change.
And there's a bit more of a process with that you'd have to go through to demonstrate why you'd be wanting to do that, and particularly not singling people out.
Absolutely. One other thing that we always say that if the employee hasn't responded, the employer holds the ultimate accountability. And whilst it's frustrating, we're just like, can't you give us back the letter that we asked you for? Follow it up, because if you just withdraw it or you don't do anything, the Fair Work Commission says you're the employer, you're the parent. You know, it's your responsibility.
Your record keeping is your responsibility.
That's it.
Some people, a lot of people are now using the online platforms for their employment records. So that's another great way to do it, where they have to respond electronically. They continually get harassed by reminders. I did that. What happens if an employee refuses to convert to permanent? I jumped ahead.
That's okay. An employee can refuse or decline conversion. That's okay. But again, that documentation is critical. And the templates that we've been developing to assist employers, we've modified. Like, we're learning as we go. So we've got the guts of it nailed down, but now we've added in why do you not want to become part-time? So we can sort of try to understand, we're actually getting the words straight from the employee about why they don't want to convert, and we're having that documented. The important part is that it's not a one-time deal. So if you do this, with your employees and they say, no, I don't want to be permanent, I want to stay casual, that's fine. Tick here, you understand, yep, sign here, great, that's fantastic. But you should be doing it at least every 12 months. Again, maybe tying it into your employee handbook. Or if your award has a provision for 6 months, you should be doing it every 6 months. Sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Where did I slip? Where did I go? There we are.
There you go.
What is a regular pattern of hours for the last 6 months on an ongoing basis? At how many hours per week does this become relevant? If someone works 10 hours per week, do we need to offer them a conversion to full time?
Yeah, and I think this was a question that we were asked, and I included it in here because there was a couple of key points that probably indicate a little bit of a misinterpretation, that conversion is to full-time. It does not have to be full-time. So conversion is to permanent employment, and those two categories of employment are part-time and full-time. So it's not about saying I've got a casual employee that might be working 10 hours, now I have to find them full-time hours. That's not what it's about. It's about conversion either into a part-time or full-time category.
You can also have the situation where you've got a casual who works anywhere between 20 to 30, and you could give them a conversion with a guarantee of 20 hours per week with an opportunity to work additional hours on mutual agreement by both the employer and the employee. So you'd go on with your guarantee at the lower number that you know that you can always guarantee with them, but then you'd have an opportunity to flex.
Yeah, and I think we've also got a question about seasonal employees coming up, which is going to be the same sorts of things. So there's no minimum quantum of hours that defines regular pattern. It could be 2 hours every Monday, and that may only be working 2 hours every Monday. But
Sarah would allow them to do 2 hours, not 3.
Yes, that. So that may be their regular pattern, but that regular pattern may not meet part-time. It may not meet some of the other.
Yeah, it may not meet part-time. Yeah.
So yeah, you certainly need to be having a look at what your award allows you to do.
So this ties into what I asked beforehand. How do we manage seasonality? For example, we have staff who work 36 hours a week during 12 weeks of spring, but will probably only work 24 hours during winter. That's what I said. So going for the 24 opportunity to be able to increase. I think you need to be very clear though when you've got that part-time agreement with the 24. If they're going to pick up additional shifts, is that by mutual agreement and it's going to be at the ordinary rate, or is that a requirement of the employee to work additional hours that they're being rostered for outside their normal scope of hours, and you will be paying overtime for it?
Yeah.
So you can require staff to work reasonable overtime. So you can say, I know it's 24, but I require you to work a few extra hours, as long as there's no family or external circumstances that would prevent them. You potentially would have to pay overtime unless it was a mutual agreement then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this situation does sort of highlight how casuals can supplement a workforce. So it may very well be that you've got your part-timers doing 24 hours and you are bringing in casuals to do that extra buffer during spring or winter.
Yeah.
And they're only going to be there for 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only going to be doing potentially 10 or 12 hours. So there may be that capacity to just realign your casual workforce, having your core crew and then supplementary labour coming in.
And we talk, you can use fixed term engagements for fixed periods. Look, we have fixed term, and that's a whole another webinar that we probably need to talk about. Some employers think they can operate like the government seem to.
As we say, not as we do.
Where they just continually have people on fixed term contracts. For the people outside the world of government, if you've got a rolling fixed term contract, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It's implying that there's ongoing regular work and consistent work with it. So they seem to be able to do it in government, but you can't do it outside of that.
Yeah,
easily.
and I think that there may be industries that are particularly tied to funding that can use fixed term contracts, but just because you have a fixed term and the roll on is not going to exempt you from things like redundancy should your funding contract be withdrawn. So you're still going to have to, same as you would for any normal employer, that if you've lost a major contract and you now no longer need the labour to support, you're going to be going through a redundancy process. If you've got fixed term contracts that are rolled, you're still going to do that.
Yeah. Your
I skipped.
You've missed it.
Too fast.
Your regular hours could continue as a permanent employee without significant change. What are significant changes?
Okay, well, the first part of this question is actually an extract from the casual employee information statement. So then we was being asked the question, what's a significant change? So a significant change essentially could be that, so let's just say the employee had a pattern of working 5 hours a week, but the minimum part-time hours required by the award is 15. That would require a significant change to convert to permanent. So therefore, that may rule that particular employee ineligible for conversion. Changing to part-time or full-time would impact the number of hours able to be offered or days of the week. So you might have a casual employee who's only available to work Saturdays and Sundays. You may not have any part-time, full-time hours. You may not be able to meet the award requirements if the employee doesn't have the availability. Or because they're casual and they pick up an evening shift, a morning shift, a weekend shift, they might be on average working 20 hours, but it's because you're able to offer them ad hoc and they can accept it. Whereas you may be only able to offer them sort of part-time hours fixed, guaranteed on Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, because that's a regular period of trade. But that may not suit the casual employee because of either the childcare requirements or whatever else. But because they had been working ad hoc and could do morning, evening, weekend and just pick it up, you may not be able to offer the same volume of hours if you have to convert them. So it comes down to personal situation as well.
And the business requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Reasonable grounds for refusal.
This is refusal from the employer.
Yes, so if you've got a casual employee who has requested and you're refusing it on reasonable grounds, we're being asked, what does reasonable grounds actually look like? First clarification point, some awards do contain a substantial definition.
Of reasonable grounds?
Yes, some do, some don't. So the actual act itself doesn't and the information statement doesn't.
But the award do.
Some of the awards do. So it's usually things like non-renewal of large contracts that are going to see the hours.
So if you were, say, building a hospital, and so you've been regular and consistent, but there's an end date for the project within a few months, they might say, well, we can't offer you permanent because this project's about to finish and we know that it's got a specific end date.
Yeah, that may be where you could potentially use your fixed term contracts, project contracts.
Just till the end of the contract with it.
But, you know, if there is something that you can actually tangibly say that this structure is going to change as of a certain date and that's why you're casual, that could be a reasonable ground. But there is an extended definition in some awards, and on our Q&A sheet, we have included one of those award requirements for what is reasonable grounds.
This
was my favourite question.
Where does business right opinion to access a casual staff member on their merits factor in conversion? For example, work ethic, performance, attendance. So I'm, as a business, I should be able to friggin' choose who I want to be permanent or not. So there.
And I choose you, dear. Oh, excellent. I have so many comments for that. But if you are choosing based on their work performance and you are saying, I'm not going to convert that casual employee because they're
lazy,
that too, or their attitude is pretty crap.
Or I know that you'll take lots of sickies, or you've got children and you'll take time off to look after them, and this is the reason why.
And that's why
you've got an operation coming up, I know, so you're going to want to go permanent, so we have to pay you over that period.
Yeah. That is what we call general protection. So if the employee has requested to transition to permanent employment, they are exercising a workplace right. So it is very easy for an employee to claim, particularly if there's no consistency in your process, or you're using reasons that have nothing to do with their pattern of work. For example, their performance, attitude, attendance, gender.
That comes in a different bucket to deal with.
Yeah, and that's a bucket you don't want to play in.
Not during this process.
No. If there are performance issues with your casual employees, the bad news is you have to manage it. The same as you would with a part-time or a full-time employee. Once your casual employee has passed their minimum engagement period, you can't just not put them on the roster.
don't do what an employer rang and told me they did the other day, where they had a long-term casual that had done the wrong thing. And so he said, so I just told them to F off and don't bother coming back.
Because they're casual.
And he was very surprised that they got a unfair dismissal application.
Yeah. And casual employees with dismissal applications, I've done a number of them this year. So
There's been quite a few that have come through.
Quite a few. So if you are thinking that you've got some protection, you've got none.
Yeah.
And potentially, again, one of my crystal ball observations is the Commission is, because of the changes to casual employment, is going to be far less tolerant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much it's nothing to do with performance, deal with it separately. Well, this was my other favourite question.
Does a probationary period, minimum engagement period, apply when they convert to full-time?
Or part-time?
Or part-time, yeah.
No, it does not.
We get asked that all the time, actually.
We do. Basically, the probation period, which is industry terminology, or the qualifying period as it's defined under the Act, refers to 6 months or 12 months, depending on the size of your business. It only applies to the first 6 or 12 months of employment, whether they were casual, part-time or full-time, fixed term, whatever.
Not if they were contractors.
No, because they wouldn't be employees. But you cannot go into another probation period or qualifying period when you convert from casual to permanent.
It's ongoing employment.
Yeah. And we were asked this question because, again, of performance issues. So if there are performance issues, they should have to undergo another probation period. Fair Work will clearly turn around and say to you, as an employer, you need to manage the performance of the employee, not use the legislation to try and manage them for you.
The Casual Employment Information Statement as award refers to your employer can only say no after consulting you and only if there are reasonable grounds. What does consulting look like?
Well, consulting looks like any other consultation process for significant change. So it looks like documented evidence that you've spoken with the employee about the conversion. You've given them all of the options, the what's on offer, what's not on offer, making the offer, confirmation.
You have to engage in some way of communication, and we would recommend that it's backed up with documentation. So you could actually just sit down and have this whole conversation verbally with them, but then follow it up with a letter or an email or something like that so that you can document down what was said.
And look, I think I'm going to take that one step further and saying that if
you always want to outdo me,
I do, because I'm the one who has to go to the Commission.
You're the one. I just promised the world and the Deanne cleans the mess up.
If I'm going to the Commission to demonstrate that an employer has had the conversations, having a signature on a document or having a reply email. Emails are now being challenged because of hacking and God knows whatever else. Yeah. So a signature on a document to say, yes, I do, no, I don't, is going to be your best friend.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I finished the questions.
Yay!
So we will check our little Q&A section on our website.
Yeah, I can see we do also have a few Q&As that are coming up. So if you do have questions, start putting them in now, because we are just about finished off the webinar and we'll answer the questions before we finish up.
Yeah.
Okay, so casual loading offset. So this was a good case. This was a win for employers. Woohoo!
Yes. It meant that if you stuffed up the conversion, essentially, for whatever reason, or the conversion was challenged, that they could not double dip with their 25% casual loading. So
this came about when one of our road commissioners said you were actually a casual employer over that period of time.
And you were part-time or full-time.
And you're a part-time rather, so they paid you as casual, but actually, yeah, I think that you were part-time. The employer said, well, can we use the casual loading to offset any annual leave that they would have accrued over that time? Because it's double dipping, they've already been paid the 25% loading. And the commissioner said, suck it in, you have to pay them their leave on top of the 25%. So this actually went through to the High Court, I think, didn't it? Got challenged. Yes. And at that level, they overturned it and said, no, you can't double dip. So if you have not transitioned someone across to casual, to permanent, and they have gone back and said, I actually should have been permanent since 2010, you can then use that 25% to offset that annual leave and personal leave entitlements that they should have been paid over that time. So there's a form of protection. If they had not done that, it would have they had to do it.
It would
They
have been
had
an absolute disaster.
Because everybody who's been casual for a regular and consistent period could have gone back and said, you owe me X number of annual leaves, which is going to go straight onto your balance sheet as a business and not be very nice.
Absolutely.
So that's good.
So that is a good thing.
Yeah. This is just a, woohoo.
It snuck through.
They said it was the loudest silent announcement.
Yes.
So 10% from the 1st of July, you need to be aware that that is going to be the employer contribution for superannuation that you're going to have to start applying.
A couple of other key points with the superannuation increase is that obviously we're probably looking at the Fair Work wage increase being released in June, coming up to the 1st of July.
Yeah, there hasn't been anything said that it's going to be delayed again.
There was nothing last year that said it was going to be delayed until it came out. How this 5.5% will factor into that, I imagine it will be brought in by all of the industrial bodies.
Yeah, that they're already having to
an
wear.
Offset. Whether or not the increase for this year is going to be delayed, staggered, we have no indication that it will or will not be. We have no indication that it'll be a 0% increase or a whatever else. The growth that we're having in the employment market is not, I guess, helping from an employer perspective of having a very low increase. So it's a watch this space, but 10%.
There is going to be a strong push from the unions and from the left for a wage increase, I would say.
Yeah.
Because it's been so low.
There will be an equally strong push
from the employer side. Yeah. So watch this space.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, put a number on it. What do you reckon it's going to be?
I'm going to go 1.5 to 2%.
Oh, see, I was going to say 2.5%.
Well, see, I'm factoring in this 0.5 here.
What was it this year?
1.75.
Yeah, it could be around 2.
Could be.
Okay.
The other thing with the superannuation increase is you're going to see changes to part-time junior employees from July 2022. So it will mean that there's going to be more of your workforce, particularly if you've got part-timers, casuals, juniors that are working a lower number of hours, then removing the threshold.
Yeah, I heard that.
So the 350, 420.
Yeah, it's slightly different under the hospitality award.
They're going to be removing that. So it is going to be making employers responsible for superannuation at an earlier age, which is great for the kids, I guess, and the people that are doing those hours, not so good for the employer.
Yeah. Another cost.
Yes, yet another one.
Okay. Oh, we had another question here.
We did have a question come through by email this morning, and it refers to the vast majority of our staff are part-time or full-time. We only have a few casual juniors. However, recently, 2 of our permanent staff who have been with us for less than 6 months asked if they could please be converted to casual because they want the higher hourly rate of pay. The main focus of this employer is that they
want it the other way around.
They want it and this is what I was saying about the legislation doesn't deal with this part of it. They don't want to lose the staff because finding staff is really hard. So they're saying you can have whatever you want, essentially. What I would do in this case is I would have a written request from the employee to the employer requesting that they want to be paid as a casual employee. Then convert to casual. Then I would have some correspondence going back to the employee in relation to the casual conversion, referring to the fact that they're doing it without duress. It's mutually
what casual employment means, giving them that Fair Work statement of casuals.
Yeah, all of that stuff. So at least you've got a documentation train about where the request originated from. Because it's all well and good for an employee to say, yes, I want this, until they go mountain bike riding on the weekend and break their arm, collarbone, and whatever else, and then they change their mind. Because once this person goes casual, they will lose their balance of personal leave. You will have to pay out their annual leave.
What about continuity of employment if they transition back to being permanent within a 3-month period?
I asked this question of Fair Work the other day. Their sick leave.
Of course you did.
I did. Sick leave, they lose their sick leave.
Yeah.
But the continuity of employment for the purposes of redundancy, long service leave, etc., all continues on.
Right. There you go. Okay, so Guy's asked, we've got contract work for a specific period of time. So that would come under what we discussed before, that reasonable grounds for not granting a conversion for the casual staff, because it's a contract period of time that you're going.
But again, even if you're passing that sort of 6 and 12 month mark for the conversion, I would be doing the written offer, because you still have to comply with the casual employee information statement. It says you have to make a written offer. Your written offer is not really going to be an offer, but it's going to be further to the casual conversion requirements. We confirm that we are unable to because of blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And the next one, what if you've got staff that go from one contract to the next, and we don't know when they'll start? Each one has different hours. How does the conversion affect us?
Look, I think it has to be, you're going to have to assess it, I guess, on those milestones of 6 months, 12 months, whether you're a small employer or a large employer, in accordance with the information statement and the award. But again, if you really can't get into that regular and systematic projection or the expectation, or if you're not able to look at, we can guarantee you 12, 15 hours, but there may be fluctuations.
I think you have to look at it historically, because I've heard employers say that before, but then, they've been operating for, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and it's been really regular and consistent. And they say, oh, but we may not get a next contract. And that's like us saying, well, we may not get someone else come with a grievance complaint for Deanne to work. We can't always guarantee, but when there's a regular pattern over time that there hasn't been any breaks, then they probably do have a good argument. Whereas if you can say, look, if you have a look over the last couple of years, you can see every year we've had down periods of, be it, a month or a couple of months, or periods of time where there literally has been no work until the next contract starts, then I think in that case you would have a good reason to say, unfortunately we can't, because there are genuine breaks in employment. But if it's historically, it's always been pretty consistent. Again, if it's looking at your different hours, you could maybe go in with your minimum number of hours with it. So you'd have to, you really have to, it's not a cookie cutter. You would have to think, if we were challenged, how would I defend my decision as to, and what evidence would I bring to the table to be able to support my decision as to why I didn't make this conversion across with it.
Absolutely.
And what about visa holders and eligibility? Okay, so the thing to remember about migration and visas is that it's very, very separate to fair work and industrial relations. So when you get someone who, you have two pieces of legislation that you have to adhere to. You have to adhere to your fair work and industrial relations, and you also have to adhere to visa rights and worker rights. So if an employee comes to you and they have a eligibility to work for 6 months, you have to, that is the minimum amount. You have to only give them work for 6 months. You cannot give them an offer of ongoing employment, because then you would be breaking the immigration legislation. If, however, they have a worker rights for a 2-year period, then during the course of their employment, you would then be able to offer them a conversion. However, you could then cap it to the end of the 2 years, because, and you'd only be breaking their employment, not from an industrial relations point of view, but if they no longer are able to work because they no longer have those worker rights.
And I think with the visa requirements, the visa gives the employee the ability to work in Australia.
Yeah.
The Fair Work legislation defines and provides the rules about how they work in Australia. So one says they can, the other says how.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could use your fixed term contracts if you know that you're going to be employing them 40 hours a week, 38 hours a week for 6 months. You say, we'll take you for as long as we can get you, and you know it's going to be 6 months. You could give them a fixed term contract for the duration of their visa. I'd also put in a little bit of a clarify that should their visa or their right to work in Australia be revoked, suspended, or whatever, that would force the cessation of that contract.
Because if someone can't work because they don't have working rights, that's actually not you dismissing them from your employment or an unfair dismissal. That is that you legally are unable to continue employing them. They don't have the right to be able to work here. So it's very different legislation.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Oh my gosh, surely no one can want to know anything more about the excitement of casual employment. So
No, it's because we did such a good job of explaining it, Phoebe. We've answered all of their questions.
I think that is the case. So look,
That's how we're going to take it anyway.
there is a lot of pressure for us to get a more permanent workforce, and I don't think that pressure is going to subside. I think that will only increase. And having said that, I do think that there is a strong requirement, that wasn't good wording, there will always be a need for casual employment, a casual base. There's always cases, times, individuals with it. Doesn't need to be scary, it doesn't need to be complicated. You're not going to be forced to give all these staff additional hours. It's only going to be what you already give them in the normal pattern of work. There is a little bit more documentation and formalization of it. Dot your I's, cross your T's, get a system in place, and it really shouldn't cause you too many headaches.
Yeah, first, as I said, the first one's always the hardest.
Yeah, and then you just kind of get into a bit of a system with it, and we all sort it out. But if you do have any questions or any concerns, please, don't hesitate to let us know. We're always happy to assist you as best we can. We are coming up to the end of financial year. A really good time for you to start to do some of that review. Am I award compliant? Am I rate classification? Is my handbook up to date? Am I getting all my staff to sign off on it? That's a checklist that you really should. It doesn't matter if you employ 2 staff or you employ 200. You should be going through that checklist every year.
Absolutely.
And then you won't have dramas.
Excellent. Well, we're done.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us.
Enjoy the rest of your week and have a lovely weekend.
See you.